Hello and welcome back to the Publisher Podcast from Media Voices. I'm Esther Thorpe, and this season we're bringing you the best sessions from the Definitive AI Forum for Media, Information and Events, which we held with Flashes and Flames in London at the end of last year. As always, each episode this season is accompanied by a write-up of the key takeaways, which you can find on our site, voices.media, or get delivered straight to your inbox every Tuesday by subscribing to the Publisher newsletter. You can find the sign up for that at voices.media. This week we're featuring a panel discussion on how AI is changing and will change newsrooms and media content. But before we get into that, I just wanted to let you know that from the end of February through March we'll be running our series of AI-focused masterclasses online. These are the ones we first hosted in person at our AI event in November. They're all focused on how to get the best from AI in your publishing business, from measuring ROI to optimising engagement and content discovery. They're running every Wednesday from the end of February, and you can book now and see the schedule at voices.media/masterclasses. There's even a special discount code, MV25, to save 25% on the £49 ticket price. So back to this week's episode. On the panel, moderated by myself, was Tom Jackson, EVP and CTO of News UK, Carola York, Managing Director of FT Specialist Europe, and Stuart Forrest, Global Audience Director at Bauer Media Group. We discussed how each of these newsrooms is using AI, and how these tools are helping editorial teams solve their own pain points, both pre- and post-publishing, as well as how it's being used in other departments like sales, subscriptions and marketing. A common theme was that AI is being approached as a way to help journalists make the most of their talents and the content they produce, not replace it. So we also explored what success looks like for newsroom AI projects, and how they're feeling about the future. Here's Beth Ashton from StoryQ introducing the session.
So the next panel is all about how AI is changing newsrooms and content. And one of the ways newsrooms are using AI to change the news gathering process is by using our newsroom tool, StoryQ. You've probably realised from your lanyards that this is an advert, but don't worry, I've only got 2 minutes. I've been where you are now. My name's Beth Ashton. I spent the last decade leading audience strategies at The Independent, The Telegraph, the Manchester Evening News, and the thing that frustrated me most in the newsrooms that I was working in was how many audience opportunities we were missing. And it wasn't because the teams weren't good enough, but because there was too much noise, too many tabs. A lot of decision-making relied on gut instinct or a data bottleneck. So when I left my last role to build StoryQ, I wanted to solve some of those problems. StoryQ removes grunt work within the news gathering and commissioning process. It reduces overpublishing, helps your teams adapt as algorithms and audience behaviour changes, and eliminates the need for expensive retraining every few months. So you are probably thinking, what does it actually do? Essentially, it creates a prioritised list of what your audience wants to read today based on your data. Journalists put in sources, Instagram accounts, Google Trends, YouTube accounts, subreddits, and it crunches all your data and predicts how well those stories will do. For example, you might want an emphasis on headlines that appeal to your Google Discover audiences or that work for loyal audiences, and we use training data to provide headlines, URLs, headings even for the story. We only work with publishers, so it's really aimed at enhancing journalism and not replacing journalists. It even tells you which URL to use and which stories to link to next. And if I had £1 for every time I've been asked that working in audience, I wouldn't be here trying to sell StoryQ to you now. So we've got a limited number of month-long free trials to give away, so come and find us or connect with us on LinkedIn. And without further ado, we have a brilliant set of panellists discussing the mammoth topic of how AI is changing and will change newsrooms and content. So we've got Carola York, Managing Director, FT Specialist Europe. We've got Tom Jackson, EVP and CTO, News UK. Stuart Forrest, Global Audience Director at Bauer Media Group. And all expertly moderated by Esther Thorpe, Editorial and Events Director at Flashes and Flames.
Thank you. Setting that expectation high. I'm conscious there's a clock with not much time on it. So I want to just get very quickly from each of you what your job title is and how AI interacts with that. Carola, if we can start with you.
My job title is Managing Director of FT Specialist Europe, and we have a series of specialist brands, the nature of FT Specialists. One is B2C, the others are B2B. So I suppose AI, for me, is across every single department. It is not unique to just the newsroom, which is obviously the topic today, but it's embedded in everything that we are looking at in terms of how we are developing our products for our customers, as well as how we are using it to enable efficiencies, productivity internally. So it's sort of, we are trying to get it across every bit of the business wherever we can.
Morning, I'm Tom Jackson. I run the technology teams for News UK, so that's The Sun, The Times, Sunday Times, and our broadcast brands, Virgin Radio, Talk Sport, and Times Radio. And I suppose I'm the kind of leader on AI, but the truth is AI is kind of bubbling up across the whole business, as I'm sure all of you are finding. So I see our teams as enablers. We have people who really know deeply what AI is capable of, and they're the ones who are helping those out in the business to embed it in what they're doing.
And I'm Stuart Forrest. I'm the Global Audience Director at Bauer Media in the publishing business, so across the UK and Germany. How does AI... AI is obviously making decisions about the extent to which our content is discovered by our consumers on various different surfaces externally. Internally, I'm pretty focused on how we can use AI to improve the workflows that help our journalists to write well and be competitive.
So I'd love to get into some of the tools and the projects that you've got underway with AI. And I think let's assume zero to very little knowledge, because I know when we were talking in the briefing call, you said, obviously we're using all these tools. And I think sometimes that isn't obvious to people in the room. So kind of, we start with you. How are you using AI? What projects are underway at the moment?
If we're just looking at the newsroom to start with, we're using AI tools in lots of different departments. But if we just look at the newsroom to start with, I suppose there are three key ones that our teams are using. We have enterprise versions of ChatGPT, they have access to Gemini, and they also have access to a transcription tool, and we specifically use Otter at this moment in time. And I think what's really been quite powerful is, traditionally, I suppose tech has been something that the tech department have done. Now, these tools are enabling our editorial teams to look at the pain points that they might have with areas, or things that they can do to speed stuff up or inspiring them. So there's custom prompts that we have. We now have this AI hack library that's created for the editorial team, but by the editorial team. And I think that's the most important thing. It's been created by them, for them to use. And it's not created by me. It is not created by someone in the tech team. It is created by the people who are in the business doing this every single day. And there's prompts from simple things like create ideas for creating headlines that might be SEO optimized, or a freelance brief has been given. They can then check, has that freelancer followed the brief that they were given? And it's a time-saving tool, but it's the pain points that they're experiencing, and it's putting it into their hands. And I think that's a key thing. Another tool, which is actually not within the newsroom, but I think will enable us to get closer to our customers, it's been talked about earlier, Gong, which we're using in our subscription sales team. That is obviously really powerful for the subscription sales team, but we are really starting to see how powerful it could be, and is starting to be, giving customer insights to us, because every single customer is having a conversation with one of our sales teams. Those are now in those systems. Trying to get that extracted out previously from the sales team and feeding that back to editorial has not been straightforward. It's really not simple. Now that those are being recorded, we can start to use that to feed back into both existing customers, what they like about our products, but also prospective customers, and what they, if they convert into a sale, what they liked and why. If they didn't, why isn't that? And also views about us versus our competition and what's coming out through those conversations. And I think that's going to be really, really powerful in terms of how we can feed that back into the business, into product development, into how editors are listening and understanding how our customers are using the products that they're creating.
Yeah. How's the implementation of that been? Is it a case of giving people logins and seeing how they use it? Or is it do you have to more lead and be like, no, you need to use it this particular way?
I think that the tools have been there. What we've taken a next level down is saying, it's not for me to say how they use it. I'm not the expert in this. We've found some champions in the business, people who are really enthusiastic about it and wanting to experiment. And they're the ones we've put it into their hands, let them play with it, see what can come out through that, and then learning from that, experimenting with people who are really enthusiastic. They've then got enthusiastic, and then that's then filtering through into the rest of the business. So it's using those champions and people who want to embrace it.
Brilliant. Tom, what have you been up to?
Before I start, I'd pick up on a couple of themes that have been mentioned already this morning. So the first thing to say is that in News UK, we're absolutely not going to use AI to replace human journalists. Full stop. I don't think we can say that often enough. The second thing that I think we always remind ourselves is that we are legally liable for the content that we produce, and so we need to handle AI with care as a result. But the way we see it for our newsrooms is that it helps us to do stuff at scale that was previously not possible. And so as sort of two themes within that, one is making the most of our journalistic talent, and then the other is making the most of our content that they then produce. And so to give you an example of how we can now make more of our journalistic talent than we could before, is I think it's picking up on one of the themes that Christian just mentioned in the previous session, which is that rise of the individual content creator. So we are, our newsrooms are stuffed full of talent, and previously I don't think we've made enough of that. But now with AI tools, we're able at scale to build those individual brands particularly on the social platforms, using those tools, which we weren't able to do before. So to give you an example, we did some work with Fraser Nelson, one of our top Times columnists, and in particular, we got videos out there from him talking about the columns that he was about to write. One of those videos, we used AI to draft the script. We used AI to chunk those videos up, get them out there on places like Instagram. And one of those videos in particular went viral. Typically, we'd see low hundreds of thousands of views on a video on Instagram. Actually, suddenly this one went viral and had millions of views. It was about debunking the myth of lawless Britain. And that actually reached a load of Gen Z audience that Fraser had never reached before. So I think it's a good example of where we're using AI tools to enable us to suddenly produce a lot of that kind of content and get it out there to different audiences. On making the most of our content, if you look at Talk Sport, our digital editor always says it's kind of a nice problem to have, but we've got too much content. We publish on Talk Sport about 180,000 words a day. If you look at the 24 hours of coverage, that's the equivalent of the New Testament every day. So we produce a Bible of content every day, right? And, no one can listen to all of that. But we know that many of our audience are super fans of the top 5 big clubs, in the Premier League. So what we can do now with AI tools is chunk through all of that content and find all of the references to Manchester United or all of the references to Liverpool, and then create a visualized podcast around that every day. So suddenly it's enabling us to do more with content. It's not like we're using AI to create that content, but it's enabling us to do more with that content that already exists that we weren't able to do before.
Are you doing 180,000 words a day?
Some would say I do. So what are we doing? So some table stakes stuff. So obviously, trying to give access to all of our colleagues in the business to these tools, and I think probably trying to navigate the twin evils of enormous cost of giving a enterprise ChatGPT license to a staff of literally thousands, but also not having them play in a completely uncontrolled environment where they're uploading a lot of IP. So we have Bauer GPT, which is a tool which is a bit of a sandbox, and that's being actively used by digital content creators across the business for a variety of different things. By good fortune, we started to roll out a new publishing platform, which is normally a sentence that strikes fear into the hearts of anyone who's worked in digital media for any length of time, sort of in an AI era. So that's allowed us to build a lot of AI functionality natively into our platform rather than kind of bolting it on. Nobody particularly wants to see a button slapped into your CMS that allows you to generate a new headline. But when we're moving our brands onto our new platform, some really clever stuff like having our content in a vector database means that we can do some really, really cool things with stuff that motivates me as an SEO around things like internal linking, helping editors to understand all the content that is genuinely related to what they're writing. So that's all very cool. And then I'm one of a number of people working on some more specific projects. So I'm focused very much on what happens either side of the act of publishing, of the act of writing. So pre-publishing, we're doing a lot of work around kind of automation and improvement of content planning processes. So whether you're working as a news writer or whether you are creating longer form evergreen content, we've got some really nice agentic processes, semi-autonomous, either prompted by a data point or by somebody in my audience team requesting it, but delivering effectively editorial intelligence to a journalist that really helps them understand the shape and size of consumer demand. So, on a daily basis, if you're a Grazia reader, what are you interested in today? What's the angle on Meghan Markle or Kate Middleton? But similarly, if you're on Today's Golfer and you're writing a buying guide to sand wedges, actually, what's the competitive landscape into which you're going to publish? What is going to make that content stand out? What's going to make it achieve visibility? So a lot of work there. And then the final bit of the mix is around really what I would call content lifecycle management. So, we know that freshness has a strong correlation with performance in discovery, Google search, and so on and so forth. But we also know that when you have literally tens of thousands of URLs on a domain, knowing which one you spend finite editorial resource updating and which you don't is a very difficult job. So we've built, we have in trial at the moment, a really smart tool that is effectively a decision tree that takes into account performance data, consumer demand data, revenue data, ranking data. It processes tens of thousands of URLs at a time, and then it will tell you as an editor where to spend your time and where not to spend your time, which is tremendously liberating, because obviously if we can free up as much time as possible for the act of creativity and the act of journalism, then we're probably doing the best job we can of meeting the needs of our consumers.
And are you building a lot of that in-house, or is that sort of being bought in?
Yeah, I was trying to find the right words for this, because I agree with Sean. Definitely buy, not build. Yeah. But I think a lot of these AI tools are kind of half. There's not really a word that describes it. There's probably some horrible German compound noun. Yeah. So if I'm using make.com to build a 47-step agentic process, am I buying or am I building? It's probably a combination of the two. We're not writing a lot of code, but we're also not necessarily going and buying these things off the shelf, because very often for our use case in publishing, there isn't necessarily always a vendor that does it completely right. So I'd say sort of buy and augment is the best way that I would describe how we're.
Not on a T-shirt.
Yeah, but I'm definitely in the buy, not build camp when it comes to technology.
Sort of circling back to a point we made earlier on, Tom, I know you were saying about Fraser Nelson. A lot of the talent within publishers were hired because they were good writers, however long ago that was, or even recently. How are you encouraging them to, now they're suddenly expected to be more creator-like and have these camera-facing personalities? It was podcasting 5 years ago, now they're expected to do Substacks and all this other stuff. Is AI helping with that, or are you finding people are reluctant to get out of their lane?
Well, it suits some more than others, that's for sure. But what I would say is that the demands on our journalists are increasing, right? So we're expecting them to speak on Times Radio over here, and then do a podcast over here, then do a video, do a social post. And I think the benefit of AI is it makes that sustainable, because it can take some of the grunt work out of what they were previously doing. So, to use an example that's proving particularly popular in our newsrooms at the moment is more and more of our journalists are using Notebook LM. I don't know how familiar all of you are with that, but that's part of the Google Workspace suite. It comes with their suite of AI tools. And it just means that if you're a journalist with a large amount of source material for a particular story, you can put that source material into Notebook LM and you can essentially chat with it. So I was talking to Katie Prescott, our technology business editor, the other day. She's written a book on Mike Lynch, and that had an incredible amount of very complex legal source material that she used as a basis for it. And sometimes she was casting around thinking, there was that fact about the share price for autonomy 20 years ago. Where was that in the 10,000 pages of documents? And she could just immediately home in on it using Notebook LM. So it's not quite answering your question, but I think what we're seeing is that some of those productivity tools of AI are freeing the journalists up to make those increasing demands sustainable.
Are you finding that like recommending those to each other, or is there an organisational level push you have to give for some of it?
Yeah, what we found is that it's initially it was a kind of grassroots thing. what we found is that there are real pockets of excellence across our organisation. And so for us in the centre, our job, we think, is to sort of fill in the gaps between the pockets. And so we've done quite a lot of work around AI showcases for all staff, for example, where it's not been us telling our staff about what they can do with the AI tools. It's been people from the newsrooms or people from sales or people from marketing showing people how they're using these tools already, which is way more powerful.
I mean, Stuart, how's that going in your business? Because you've got a lot of quite different brands.
2 or 3 different geos and then very disparate brands. I agree with your point. I think expertise is not universal. It's not even universal within my audience team of sort of 25 people. So actually being able to distill the very best practice and kind of make sure that people can access it is really refreshing. I think for us also, human support in something like, central services like audience development, for example, the cost of sale of that isn't really justified on some of our much smaller brands. So we have a fantastic brand called Angling Times, and if the editor was here, he'd hate me for saying it, but it's basically pictures of bald men holding fish in lakes, right? Now, it's a good business model, but it's not huge, and so I can't support that with an SEO resource, but actually they now have access to a lot of the processes that some of our bigger brands like Grazia or Empire or Motorcycle News would get. And so what's going to be very interesting is, well, how much growth does that unlock? It might not feel very big compared to a Grazia, but actually if you're doing that across a number of fronts at a much lower cost, it starts to look really, really interesting.
Yeah. When it comes to success, it was at the point that a lot of people are introducing these projects. Have you got ROI targets on them, or what does success look like?
Big question that I honestly don't have the answer to at the moment. Obviously, we are using tools that we are paying for, and we have to work out how we're going to get ROI back from that. How we assess that and measure that, every tool is slightly different, so there isn't a standard way of looking at it. There can be things like, how much time is it saving? That's quite, in one sense, quantifiable in a general sense, but being very specific is quite difficult, but it's a time saving. But then saying, what do you then do with that additional time? On top of that, does it mean that you can do more with the existing staff that you've got? Or on the other side of things, how can we look at it and say, this is the big question I don't have an answer to at all yet. It's, if we're using it to create product value, how do you quantify that? How do you truly say that? Does that mean you're going to be selling more, but you're also doing a whole pile of other things alongside that? So it's not just the AI bit in isolation. And that, from what we're seeing at the moment, certainly from my perspective on my brands, it's really, really difficult. I'd love to know from the audience here if they've got any examples of other things. I'd love to learn from others.
Ultimately, it's obviously revenue and EBITDA, isn't it? We've just come out of, or we've come into the end of an investment year in this technology, so that's quite freeing, actually, because you don't necessarily have to think about the ROI, and we're busy spending money on tokens like everybody else is, left, right, and centre. What are we actually looking at? So obviously, the lagging indicator is revenue. So, is your content reaching the same number of people? Is it engaging those people? From an external perspective, we're in a landscape where it's getting tougher anyway, so perhaps standing still is the new up. I'm actually focused at the moment probably on more leading indicators around usage and adoption. We have a content trends email which goes out to some sort of 80, 100 content creators every morning, and I'm looking at that just as I would any other newsletter campaign because it's currently delivered by email. So what's my open rate on that? What's my click-through rate on that? We have a tool where you can reply to the email and ask a question about something that's in the email, and I want to know how many people are employing that. So there's a lot of softer metrics that I'm focused on really around adoption. I think one of our consultants was telling us that our content trends tool produces something like 35,000 words every morning and does the equivalent of about 40 hours work before our journalists have got up. So that's quite a nice tool, but it's really nothing if we're just publishing it to no interaction and engagement from our internal consumers. So that's where I'm really, really focused. And then on some of the other tools, it's similar really. It's like, we've built these semi-autonomous agent workflows that are very different to prompts. ChatGPT is 3 years old this Sunday, I think. So actually, we've got some adopters in our businesses who are quite mature users of ChatGPT, but they're using prompts. And so actually what I'm focused on at the moment is trying to find the people who are really kind of expert, drag them slightly away from focusing on their own prompts and towards inputting into our agentic processes, because that's how we can capture their learnings and make sure we can share them more widely. So that's another thing I'm looking at the moment.
Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Carola. It's really hard to judge the ROI. Yeah, so, for example, we've rolled out a transcription tool for all of our journalists, particularly for the feature writers who are doing interviews, which has been incredible. You know, they've described it as a miracle and so on. It's amazing feedback. And we've calculated that it's saved millions of hours across our newsrooms. But what does that actually mean in terms of value is kind of hard to then quantify. We're doing quite a bit around, which isn't necessarily AI related, it's general, but I think it's important in this new world where we're struggling to judge ROI always. We're creating these value frameworks which show, so take video, for example, which we're all doing more of. Yeah, you can sort of tweak one thing around video, you know, publish more on YouTube over here, and then suddenly you find, and that's giving you benefit over here, but then suddenly you're finding that your indicators on the other side are going down. And so being able to understand that in a more kind of granular and sophisticated way, I think is helpful. So that's something that we're leaning into more.
I've got a bit of future gazing to do in a minute because this is a sort of two-part panel. Do any audience members have any questions at this point about sort of how AI is changing newsrooms at the moment?
Hi, it's two questions really. The time that's saved, if you take the example of transcription, how do you think it's being used? Is it more thinking time, more writing time, or is it just more spare time? That's one question. And then one for Stuart is Bauer GPT Chat GPT with Bauer stamp, or is it something more than that?
I'll take the transcription. We have, within our brands, very, very small editorial teams. In some cases, I've only got 3 people working on a brand. So we've had a lot of issues with people saying they were overloaded, workload. So I think it has helped us balance that. So it has saved time and made they're less challenging to us about workload. So I think that's been a positive from it. I think it's been more of a time saving than it necessarily has been what can they do outside that at the moment. But that doesn't mean it won't change as we go forward. I think that's what we're seeing at this moment in time.
We've got a kind of directly measurable increase in output, I think, from some of our feature writers, that they've been able to say, look, you imagine what it was like in the old days where you did an interview, then you had to listen back to the tape, in some case get someone else to transcribe it, then read through and think, okay, what's the angle here? What are the key points? And then work out, okay, how am I going to write this article? All of the first bit of that process, we've been able to use AI to take out. And so now they can just think about, okay, how am I going to write the article? So we've got some feature writers who've been able to say, well, we're able to do, rather than 2 a week, we're now able to do 4. So there are measurable impacts from that.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. We're definitely seeing an uptick in productivity where people are using it. Bauer GPT, no, it's not just ChatGPT with a new label. Thanks, John. It's a controlled environment. It's accessed via the VPN. You've got access to Perplexity. You've got access to ChatGPT and a couple of others. It's not as good as enterprise ChatGPT, and it's not as good as at some tasks. So a lot of my audience team who are typically crunching data will also use our enterprise ChatGPT license, but it's built for specific tasks. And honestly, it is balancing cost and safety against really those two things. We want to democratize access. We don't want to burn literally millions of euros of budget on a load of enterprise licenses that are probably over-engineered for the task.
Obviously, things are accelerating very, very quickly. What is at the forefront of your minds when it comes to preparing for AI, challenges, opportunities in the future? And I'm going to slightly lead this because, Carola, I know you're saying to me that there's this popular idea that niche and B2B content is immune from things like AI overviews. But I don't think it is it?
Sadly not. Our experience is we have audiences that we sell advertising against, so there's a volume play there, and the AI overviews have definitely had an impact on our traffic. And I think with AI mode in the pipeline and coming down the line, that is also going to, unfortunately, probably hit us as well. So I do think that's really, really important. But the key thing for us is saying, what are the channels we're in control of? If organic search is, that's going to shift and that's going to move. What are the channels that we are in control of? And that's been a massive focus for our teams. And so, email is very, very important to us. In the B2B world, we know our audiences, they're very defined. How can we understand more about them? How can we get more data on them? How can we also create certainly where you have advertising, are there other things which are less volume dependent? Can we create other things which might be more creative ways of saying we can still reach our audience, and it's a really defined audience, we know exactly who they are and what could it be, instead of the standard display advertising? And I think the other big piece that we're also focused on as well, which has been talked a bit today, is that trust and that brand is going to be crucial for us going forwards. In the B2B world, I don't know whether others, but traditionally brand advertising has not been something that you've done in the B2B world, and thinking about that brand. And that is something that we are now really, really focused on, saying to succeed, we have to be number one out there, maintain that, but also we've got to be discovered. What else can we be doing outside that? If the organic search is dropping, what else should we be doing, and how can we push the brand out, have that brand credibility? How are we positioning ourselves in the world so people will come to us, they'll come to us directly instead of through that organic search channel, or otherwise, whether it's email or other things. And I think those are sort of two key things that are really, will help us continue to be at the top in the markets that we operate in.
The big thing that sits out there for us is the so-called zero-click threat. The summaries in the big AI platforms that mean that people are not clicking through as much. So really, for us, it's about thinking about, well, what can we major on that is hard for AI to replicate? And so it's things, if you take Talk Sport, for example, very hard for AI to replicate that kind of, particularly football, but other sports opinion in any meaningful way, and to generate that kind of love in the audience that people have for that.
I mean, do you see news as being as much of a threat? Because it takes quite a while for the AI overviews to catch up. Or are they just going to get faster? Well,
it's coming, isn't it? And so I think if you take the Times, for example, we have the benefit of having a major national news brand that also now has a radio station. So we're making a big bet on audio next year. And by definition, that means video, because as Christian was saying, pretty much all audio is now visualized in one way, shape or form. And that's harder for AI to replicate. And then on The Sun, we're doing some incredible work in video with a series called Sun Originals, which is appointment-to-view shows that are on parenting, cost of living, but also there's one, for example, called Tactics Exposed, which is on football. And we're getting comments from the audience back saying, I never expected to get this depth of analysis from The Sun. And so we're confounding people's expectations as well, which I think is hard for AI to replicate. So that's where we're headed.
Yeah, it's a similar story for us. I think, as a sector, we have to wake up to the fact that there are vast types of content that can and will be synthesized by AI. And I think more importantly, where consumers don't really care whether it comes from an AI or not. So it feels at the moment foolhardy to try and chase recovery in those topic areas rather than think about the direction of travel, think about what has always made quality brands famous and lean more into that. And that's what we are trying really hard to do. It's not always easy because, it can be a bit of an oil tanker in any large publishing company, but that's what we have to do. We have a very diverse portfolio. So I see, and I lead our SEO and audience team. So I see vast differences in the extent to which we're seeing either the presence of AIOs, the willingness of consumers to accept what's in those AIOs rather than continue to click blue links. But of course it's coming, right? Of course it's coming. So you have to lean into it. And for me, the questions we should be asking ourselves as publishers is what we're producing genuinely distinct? Does it provoke some kind of emotional response from a consumer? So the example I always use is that, we've got a cooking website in Germany, the business, and I'm sure it's the same for BBC Good Food. Traffic from telling people how long it takes to make a poached egg has probably gone, right? Because I don't really care. It's going to be an AI overview. But the inspiration which comes from a content collaboration with Raymond Blanc on how to make the greatest poached egg on avocado toast that you'll ever make, that provokes a different response in me as somebody who loves cooking at the weekend, right? I'm going to engage with that content. It can't be synthesized as easily, and I'm just not sure as a consumer that I would accept it. And so that's really where we have to play. Bauer's a 150-year-old publishing business. If you look at what's been the common thread through those 150 years, it really has been, it's going to sound trite to say it, but it's really, really high-quality brands that are creating content for people who care passionately about the topic, and the people who are creating it are expert and qualified to do so, and you've got to lean into that. That's where I feel optimistic.
Poached eggs now, it's making me hungry. I think we've got time for maybe one or two audience questions, if anybody has anything burning they would like to ask.
I would like to ask about AI policy. So I was wondering how you're approaching your AI policy. I think in particular, Carola, for you, because you were talking about ChatGPT as one of the tools that your journalists are using. Obviously, ChatGPT is an open model, so whatever you put in it, you're sharing with the world. So just wondering how you're viewing your, what the pillars of your AI policy are and how you approach it.
Well, number one, our ChatGPT is an enterprise version, so it stays within the FT's world, so it is absolutely not going out. And that is a part of a policy that nobody is allowed to use any tool that allows our content to be put in anything outside. So I think that is sort of fairly fundamental. There are general policies we have. I think as others have talked in the room today, it is very much about, we are using AI to enable content creation. It is not creating it. It is helping us do that. There's always a human all the way through everything that we do, and it's controlled. And I think we are embracing it, but embracing it cautiously and making sure that everything that is being used for is tested, it's secure, it's safe, and is done in a way that what is going to be sent out is trustworthy. So I think that's sort of core to what we're doing, but it's certainly nothing goes outside our own environment.
Stuart, you're not on Enterprise ChatGPT.
No, we are on Enterprise ChatGPT. Yeah, so exactly. I think that's table stakes, right? All of this. I think the thing I've been reassured by today is probably only a couple of months ago, people felt the need to say we don't use AI to create content, and increasingly, I think it was Christian who made this point that that's just the norm, right, for quality publishers. I think from an AI policy, we're focused much more squarely right at the moment on our external AI policy. So, how can we control the ability of bots to crawl our content? But that's probably a topic for this afternoon.
Yeah, that's a topic we're spending all day.
Not in 27 seconds.
I think we have 25 seconds if anybody has a very quick question.
Yeah, a lot of B2B tech brands I work with talking a lot about GEO and optimizing their content for generative engine optimization. Is that something you're doing a lot of, or is it not on your radar yet?
I'm running a masterclass this afternoon on this topic, if you'd like to come along. Short answer is, I've got no time for the GEO bros. I think that actually GEO and SEO have a huge amount in common, far more in common than most people realise. And so, there've always been snake oil salespeople in digital marketing, and today is no different. So the fundamental principles are broadly the same. The difference is in the expectation on the consumer to synthesise versus the AI, which synthesises the answer. And, of course, the value exchange.
I think we're going to have to leave it there. I feel like we could talk about this all day, but thank you very much.
Thanks for listening, and to Tom, Carola and Stuart for joining me on the panel. Now, that masterclass Stuart mentioned at the end there, he and David Butler are rerunning it virtually if you wanted to join us. It's all about optimising for AI discovery and how the search and discovery landscape is changing and what the consequences are for publisher SEO strategies. Now, that's taking place on March the 4th, so you can book to join that and others in our special AI series at voices.media/masterclasses. This class got really great feedback at the AI forum, so now's your chance to find out what you missed. And don't forget that 25% off discount code NV25. If you want to read our key takeaways article from this panel or sign up to our newsletter, you can find both at voices.media. On next week's podcast, John Slade, CTO of the Financial Times, will be sharing what AI means to them. So I'll see you then. Goodbye.